the summer of the dead, the dying, and the merely departed. 1. I suppose I should have known the summer's tone when my sister called to say her dog was crushed. I've come to hate the telephone. No news or what killed the dog, as my mother always said. Anyway, the pelvic cage was all in pieces. Some internal organs would have to be rebuilt if there were to be a chance. There was at least a chance. I would not say the same about the accident we later saw. We had camped the night before along the Skyline Drive. How beautiful it was. How distant from just everything. What peace. In the morning we descended as we drove through the valleys of the Civil War. When we came upon the truck lying on its side, its wheels still spun. The smoke hung in the air. The car that had been struck was wedged and twisted in a ditch. Its metal frame was wrapped around the human flesh within. Someone had called the cops. From behind the steering wheel, a woman cried, I hurt. Please, my legs are cold. Her son and daughter sat upright on the nearby grass, a stranger's arms around them both. The boy's leg was oddly shaped. The girl was numb. Hang on, he told his mother. Help will come. I clambered down and stroked her hair. The shattered glass was upon her head. The car's engine in her lap, her husband dead. Her 2 friends in back were crushed and bent. I lied to her that it would be all right. A small voice called from deep within the wreck. I yanked upon the door and pulled at it until it stood up straight. A child climbed up out from the darkened mass. I lifted him and passed him on, blood upon his chest. Other help began to come, cutting tools, heavy hooks, solid bars for bending steel. There was nothing left to do, and so I went. 2. Days later, we headed north for Cambridge to drop my daughter off. Having slept at Stony Point the night before, we soon came upon the Hyde Park marble tombs of Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt and their pet dog. All were buried neatly under rolling lawns. Amid the peaceful beauty of the flowers and the trees, such elegant simplicity above the lordly Hudson. A ranger guided us from place to place. Here, he said, and here, and here, and there. And when he spoke of Franklin's death, he said, here, the president complained of stabbing pain deep inside his head. He excused himself and went to bed. And that's the way he went. And as we listened to this talk of death there beside the graves, not far away in Green, Vermont, my good friend Alan died. He had not been feeling well, not for days, perhaps for weeks, maybe even years and years. Who knows when it all begins to end? I picture Alan in his summer place among the mountains and the pine wood trees, at his table by the lake he loved, his morning paper there, his cup of tea, worried by the pain that must have climbed into his mind with swift intensity. I see his hand reach out to stop the ache that grew upon his neck. His head drops down. His face lies upon its side. His mouth falls open. He sighs and simply slips away from dying to be dead. And since he died, I visit him with frequency. I see him sitting in the office chair, opening his mail, his incessant cigarettes, the blowing of his nose, his thin white hair. I see him smiling in the hospital, the time we thought that cancer had him. I smuggled in a quarter-pounder, some fries, a chocolate shake. He soon recovered from his cyst. He taught me opera. In literature, he knew the scholars who wrote the books I'd read. We talked of trains to Vladivostok. He coughed too much. His tales went on, but he always ended with a point. I made fun of him, and he of me. I respected him, and he had faith in me. Most of all, we talked, and then he went. 3. In the meantime, somewhere in the suburbs of Philadelphia, my father sat among the elderly. beyond rehabilitation. Temporary nursing seemed to be his need. He was in a home for just a week or two. Then he joined my sister at the Jersey Shore. We all encouraged her. She needed peace of sorts. My brother was 100 miles away. I was 1,000 more. She gave him absolutely everything. She washed his clothes. She changed his sheets. She oversaw his meals and pills. There was nothing limited about her love. How lucky could he be? He acknowledged it with total trust, absolute fidelity. In any case, what could I know? I was rarely there. I dropped him a line occasionally. I'd never miss his birthday, though I was always late. It seemed always duty, rarely love. I'd find a tie for Christmas, perhaps a handkerchief, perhaps some aftershave. Once, I gave him musk. For the girls, I said. 6 months later, when we talked, he was over 80 then and just had his prostate out. He smiled as he sat there in his summer chair upon the summer porch, my sister bringing us iced tea. He smiled. We at least had that, a smile, a touch of warmth occasionally, but there was little more. He'd left us in our younger years. Each of us dealt with him in separate ways. He drank a lot, and all of us grew old. There was never hate. My mother saw to that. We saw him every Sunday when he didn't have a cold. He promised us so many things. I guess I loved him for a while. Then it turned to pity. At the end, I'm not sure what it was I felt. He died 5 days after Alan went. He was sitting on the toilet when his heart gave out, as he knew it would. He could have called the nurse. They found him leaning peacefully against the wall. I wish I had some memories, but there are a few I want to keep, holding him by the belt to keep him steady on the stairs, shortening his cane to make it comfortable, smelling his urine as we sat and talked. I see his powdered face, no hair upon his lip, his cold, clean hands so neatly slipped in along his side. His legs seemed shorter than they were. I see a crucifix, a handkerchief, my brother touching him. My sister bends to kiss his cheek. I talked with him a week before. That was enough for me. The priest does all his murmuring. I hear the goddamned Irish tenor sing like some angelic saint, and I feel the rush of tears, the wrenching in the muscles of my face. The clasps along the silver casket snap and click, and it is time to go. And even now, I still don't know what it is that I have lost. He used to be. He always was. I remember red carnations, some talk of funeral flags upon the limousines, the black procession, the hole in the ground. The musk was in his cabinet. I took it when I went. For the girls, I thought, and smiled for the scent I tried to give him. 4. Once upon a time there had been friends with whom we'd shared the raising of our kids, and they with us. Friends with whom we'd cared for over 20 years. 2 by 2 when we began, our group soon grew from 4 to 5. Not long afterwards, we made it 6. They produced the next, a girl like ours. We rounded off the 8th, like theirs, a boy. At each turning in our lives, we celebrated youth and joy, our perfection in ourselves, the 8 of us, with all our fingers and our toes intact, all bright and beautiful besides. We should have known. We first grew close among the mountains of the West, hiking rocky trails beside the Ponderosa Pine. Later there were many other paths around the lakes in the eastern woods, weeks spent along the Adriatic coast, some time in Spain, the British Isles, sharing homes, lighting candles, drinking wine. As our work took us away, we kept in touch each summer, bringing us together once again. Anyone could see it in our slides. But something happened in the summer heat. The long drought never found relief. None of us could tell you what it was that wasn't there, but all of us could sense the change that settled in the air. Too many turns, perhaps, too many separate things to do, the children now all moving on, just the strain of time, tiny angers that have grown. Who knows why or when it all begins to end? There seems so little time to talk, so little joy, only dull and silent pain. We should have known. 5. And then we dropped my daughter off. At 17, college call. She couldn't wait to go. Parents aren't supposed to hold their kids. She'd studied well. She'd earned her place. How could we keep her going? How could we keep her? How could I know the horror of her going? I remember eating ice cream. I remember telling her to watch her step as she dashed across the street. I remember holding her when she was small and bright and watching all her growth with hope that has come to pass as fact. Her mother carried her within. I carried her upon my back and in my arms as dawn began to break. It wasn't all that long ago when I told her, "Go to sleep." "It's late," I said. "Turn off the light." Now she must be her own mistress of the night. And on the morning of the day she was to go, I remember writing her a letter, trying desperately once more to tell her all I know, how to be a human, how to live and work, how to manage pain, how to succeed while struggling to keep sane, how to laugh and when to cry, how to put up with fathers when they sigh and heave and sigh. Well, at least she'll know that I know how to cry. I remember eating ice cream. Then all of us were standing in her room. Then it was time. I remember holding her as tight as I have ever done. I remember chewing on my tongue, my chest heaving hollow air. Then I pressed my stupid letter in her hand. I remember being brave as shit and failing hopelessly at it. And then we went. 6. I remember. Oh, Jesus. God, do I remember. How absolutely fucking well do I remember all of it and more. I have no conclusions. These are only ends that came to be. All the details jangle in my head. It was the summer of the dying and the dead.